Hello everyone, Inquisitor Vaughn here, and in today's video we're going to continue with our Necron deep dives, and we are going to go into the Nephrek dynasty. Now that we've pretty much done all of the Necron dynasties to the east of Terra, and by all of them I mean the ones that had enough information for me to do a deep dive on, we are going to move to the dynasties that are on the west of Terra. And to be honest, there's a lot of weird things going on with Necrons to the west, and there are not many Necron dynasties that have dynastic territories in the west as well. So this kind of makes me speculate about why this is the case and why the majority of the Necron dynasties are to the east. And it makes me think about the War in Heaven and what could have possibly went down, but these are theories that I'm going to present in a later video. I also think that the dynasties that are to the west of Terra and to the west of the Cicatrix Maledictum are connected in a weird narrative way. And like I said, this is something that I will present at the last deep dive video, because it's only then that I could explain why I think they're all connected. But for today's video, we are going to go into the Nephrek dynasty. So let's get into it. The Nephrek dynasty has a dynastic territory rather close to the solar system and the galactic core, to the north of Terra in the segmentum obscurus, but generally to the west of the other dynasties in the galaxy. The heraldic color of the Nephrek dynasty is gold, and the dynastic Ankh of the Nephrek is said to pictorially display 3 overlapping circles which represent the 3 stars of its crown world. Similar to a lot of the other dynasties that we went over in the previous videos, the dynastic glyphs of the dynasty are all forms of the heraldic symbol of the dynasty itself. So they're all broken down symbols of the Ankh of the dynasty. Now, in regards to any information about the dynasty's ancient past, there is no information available. What can be assumed is that they fared rather well in all of the conflicts that define Necron history and have survived the Great Sleep and the Great Awakening. The Nephrek dynasty are unique not for their past, but for the projection of their future. The Nephrek dynasty is amongst the wealthiest of Necron dynasties, with wealth in this context meaning access to reserves of natural resources. The worlds of the Nephrek are rich in precious metals, which are incorporated into the dynasty's legions, and their territory's closeness to the galactic core grants it access to the energy reserves of significantly younger stars than most other dynasties have access to. To elaborate on that point, the stars on the outer edge of the galaxy are referred to as the halo stars. Some of the oldest stars in the galaxy are in the halo stars. The Necron tier themselves came into existence under the light of an ancient, dying halo star. The closer you are to the galactic core, the closer you are to younger and more potent stars, which is why the Nephrek have access to powerful energy reserves. Technically, the same thing could be said for the Nephrek dynasty, which is also close to the galactic core, as well as the Nechtist dynasty. The difference is that the Nephrek dynasty territory is on the western side of the Cicatrix Maledictum. Because of such, the Nephrek are technically the closest Necron dynasty to the galactic core, and they take full advantage of the resources that positioning provides. This exploitation of position is largely driven by the Pharaon of the Nephrek dynasty, whose name is Szilfec. When Szilfec emerged from the Great Sleep, he awoke with a few nodes degraded to the point that he was on the edge of madness, and that madness defined his personality. Szilfec is obsessed with the stars, to the point where he wished to be covered with their molten glory. Because of this, the Nephrek cryptex created a skin of living metagold, which can transform into light through a complex alchemical process. Given this ability, Szilfec, in his madness, began to view himself as a god. The high-ranking overlords of the dynasty, as well as the Necron soldiers, had their necrodermis bodies invested with varying amounts of this living metagold, which enables them to temporarily transform into light itself. Using the metagold and activating it within themselves, the Nephrek invested with it can shift and stutter in teleportation across battlefields at alarming speeds. The power of the stars is something that is talked about a lot in regards to the Necrons, whereas it once contributed to their extremely short lives as Necron tier, it now serves as a source of power and sustenance to the species as Necrons. Unlike the Nephrek, who are obsessed with destroying stars, the Nephrek dynasty are obsessed with using the stars to empower themselves. This dynasty's translocation beams from their tomb worlds to anywhere else in the galaxy are so powerful due to their use of the power of the stars that they can appear at a different location at the speed of light. Their doomsday weaponry are amongst the most powerful of any dynasty, second only to the Nephrek dynasty in strength. One of the most important aspects of the Nephrek nobles is their view on being Necrons. Most Necron nobles have accepted their existence as Necrons. Some hate the fact that they were coerced into biotransference, with some even trying to actively reverse the process and become beings of flesh and blood again. The Nephrek stand out in that they wish not to go back to being biological creatures, but to move forward and become beings of pure light. They don't even want to be Necrons, they want to be light itself. Their ability to temporarily transform into light greatly empowers them in this idea that they have, but they are unable to make it a permanent change. But this is something that they are pursuing vehemently. The color scheme of the Nephrek dynasty is an interesting situation. As said before, the heraldic color of the Nephrek is gold, but it is only gold currently because of Szilfec and their use of living metagold. For this reason, the warriors of the dynasty have a burnished gold color to their necrodermis. Szilfec himself is completely gold, unblemished and spectacular, and many of the overlords of the dynasty are also incorporated with living metagold. But not all of them are. The lore specifically says that the high-ranking overlords are imbued with metagold. But what about the low-ranking overlords and the lords of the dynasty? What is their color scheme if not gold? Okay, so in the 8th edition codex, we are provided with 2 miniatures painted in the Nephrek color scheme, and the 2 miniatures are painted differently. The warrior is painted in a goldish scheme with bluish splotches near the joints of the armor. The second miniature is of a Nephrek dynasty immortal, but the scheme is primarily gunmetal silver with bright silver joints, blue and white shoulder armor, and a white and blue faceplate. This scheme, I speculate, is the original scheme of the Nephrek dynasty and is the current color scheme of the lesser nobles and warriors of the dynasty, which makes the Nephrek a dynasty that can have 2 color schemes. Now, I could be wrong here because this could have been a misprint on GW's behalf. If you look at the Necron warrior next to the Nephrek warrior, it has the same gunmetal silver of the Nephrek immortal, but the joints are not silver and the blue used in this warrior scheme is darker. Well, that and the warrior is described as a Thocht dynasty warrior. So we are going to move forward with my theory that the Nephrek dynasty has 2 schemes, with the gold being reserved for the higher ranking overlords and the forces under their command, and the gunmetal and blue being for lower ranking nobles. The Nephrek Pharaon Szilfec is the only well-known and named character of the dynasty, officially that is, but I'm going to add the possibility of another prominent Necron character coming from this dynasty. The Nephrek dynasty ability to transform into light temporarily is an ability that another Necron character has the ability to do. I mentioned him in the Charnovoc deep dive and the Nihilak deep dive. Now, do you remember who it was? If not, it's okay, it's all good. He might have just went back in time and changed your memory of him ever being mentioned. I am talking about Orikan the Diviner. Orikan is a renowned astromancer cryptech and master of the chronomancy discipline, which means not only can he determine the future events through interpreting the pattern of stars, he can actually go back in time to manipulate events and change history, according to those visions that he has of the future. He was in Zarek's court before biotransference and was a dissenting voice in the process of biotransference. He warned against it and he warned against trusting the Satan, but he was ignored. And depending on where you read the lore, it says that he was put in chains and forced into biotransference. The current lore for Orikan states that he actually underwent biotransference willingly in loyalty to the Triarch and to Zarek. But if you read his character development and his story, I think that him being forced into biotransference was a more accurate depiction of what really happened. But who knows? It was probably Orikan who went back in time and changed the lore to seem more favorable to whatever means he has going on for him in the current lore. Orikan the Diviner has the ability to transform into a being of pure light temporarily, and like I said before, he can divine the future through interpreting the pattern of stars. This is important because Orikan sees the future of the Necron race as transforming into beings of pure energy, as opposed to regaining their organic forms. But here's the thing. Orikan basically has no respect for other Necrons because they essentially ignored him and his warnings, which made them all Necrons in the first place. If you combine this with the fact that he is a chronomancer and can literally change history, it can make you question whether or not his visions of Necrons becoming beings of pure energy was a vision that he predicted in the stars, or a future that he is actively trying to make a reality. He himself is currently working on a grand scheme that will play out over a millennia when the stars align, which will see him embrace what he believes is his true destiny, which is to become pure energy. In the current lore, upon absorbing enough energy, Orikan can transform into pure energy powerful enough to defeat a Satan, and at any moment, if the stars align above him in the right way, he nearly explodes with power and strength. Orikan is literally like a Necron werewolf, but instead of a wolf, he just turns into a ball of energy, and instead of the moon that influences this transformation, it's the stars. Now, previously, I thought that Orikan could be part of the Supercar dynasty, the cousin dynasty of the Charnovoc dynasty. I also thought that he could be from the Nihilak dynasty too, both for the same reasons, the blue and gold color scheme. But knowing what I know now about the original color scheme of the Nephrek dynasty, and taking into consideration the fact that the Nephrek and Orikan have essentially the same vision for the future of the Necrons, makes me question, where could this obsession with the stars that the Pharaon Szilfec originate? Is it possible that the Nephrek nobles have always been obsessed with the stars? Could that explain why his madness went in that direction? Because it was always a pursuit of the dynasty itself. The correspondences are too obvious to ignore, and I think if GW has a prominent character, it will likely come from one of the prominent dynasties. Therefore, I officially speculate that Orikan the Diviner was originally of the Nephrek dynasty. The crown world of the Nephrek dynasty is Ariand, which is powered by the energy of 3 stars because the system it is in has 3 stars. Now, Ariand was once settled on as an imperial hive world, and as such, it was attacked by another Necron dynasty called the Altamore dynasty, who was led by the overlord Vitok. The imperial governor, completely lacking backbone, gave up against the Altamore, and the human population was enslaved by the Altamore dynasty. Then the Nephrek arose from their tombs, among them the Pharaon Szilfec himself, who drove away both the Altamore dynasty and the humans from the planet and reclaimed it for himself and his dynasty. So basically, everyday Necron drama. The Altamore dynasty won't even get a video because their history and color scheme are all unknown, so it wouldn't even be worth it. But a prominent part of their lore is that they appear to prefer taking human slaves, which goes back to what I said in the beginning of the video. There are a few weird things happening with the dynasties on the western side of the galactic map, and this is just one of them. The dynasty likes taking human slaves, which is crazy because they have a dynastic territory that is not near the solar system, but it's like on the west, where the solar system is, which is, potentially a bad thing. Because of the dynasty's position near the cicatrix maledictum, the Nephrek territory has been repeatedly assaulted by the various warbands of the Thousand Sons Chaos Legion, who strive to obtain the knowledge of how the Necrons enslaved the C'tan. Now, I don't know why they are attacking them specifically, like the Nephrek. I don't know why they are attacking the Nephrek dynasty specifically. It's not as if the Nephrek have some sort of specific knowledge of how to enslave star gods. Or do they? I question that because of the fact that the Nephrek cryptex were able to create living metagold. The only metal that is associated with the Necrons that is living is necrodermis, which means that these cryptex were able to either take necrodermis and infuse it with metagold to make it a living metagold, or they were able to take metagold itself and make it into a living substance. In fact, if we look at the lore, they did both. They created a skin of living metagold for their Pharaon Szilfec, and they imbued the warriors of those higher ranking overlords with metagold. So they were able to create living metagold and infuse necrodermis with metagold. Clearly they have a mastery over these kinds of things. And maybe they have the specific knowledge of how to trap star gods in bodies of necrodermis. And so maybe that's why the Thousand Sons are attacking their dynasty and trying to seize any information on how to do so. Earlier in the video, I mentioned two things that might support this theory that the Nephrek dynasty has some sort of specific knowledge or at least mastery over the materials that are needed to trap a star god, right? So the first one is that when describing the process by which the living metagold body turns into light, I described it as alchemical. Right? Now, if we look at the disciplines that all cryptex can master, there is a discipline called the alchemist. Alchemist cryptex are known as harbingers of transmogrification. They are also called geomancers, which is way easier to say, but basically alchemist cryptex specialize in the transmutation of matter from one form into the other. And that's exactly what needed to be done to make living metagold. They took metagold and they made it a living substance similar to necrodermis. Not only that, they were able to instill necrodermis with metagold properties that enabled the Nephrek dynasty Necrons to teleport and transport and to turn into light temporarily and do all of these interesting things that the Nephrek are known for. So apparently, if we connect the dots, the Nephrek cryptex are geomancers, they are alchemists, they are the harbingers of transmogrification. And the second thing that I said in the video, earlier in the video, was that the worlds of the Nephrek are rich in natural resources, which include precious metals which they use to imbue into their soldiery. So basically the worlds of the Nephrek dynasty are rich in this metagold material and rich in necrodermis and rich in the materials that are needed to make these things. And this is probably why the Thousand Sons are trying to find out how to make this from this dynasty specifically. And that has been my deep dive of the Nephrek dynasty. Okay, so just an overview of the information that I talked about in this video. The Nephrek dynasty has a dynastic territory in the segmentum obscurus. Their current heraldic color is gold, but that is only reserved for those of high status and the warriors under those high status individuals. The rest of the dynasty are gunmetal and blue. They have the ability to temporarily become pure light and teleport across the battlefield, and they are currently fighting against the Thousand Suns Chaos Legion. Okay, so my thoughts on the Nephrek dynasty. If I'm going to be 100% honest with you all, at first I wasn't really interested in this dynasty, and I was like dreading doing this video because I had read their entry in the codexes and I was like, so their only thing is that they turn into light and they teleport. So what, right? But then as I dove deeper into their lore, I was like, this is actually really interesting. And it's interesting because they believe in moving forward, not backwards, in regards to being Necrons. They don't want to be beings of flesh and blood again. They want to be light, beings of pure energy. And that actually projects their future in a very interesting direction. The fact that they are able to do that now in their lore, they are able to temporarily teleport across the battlefield into different locations by using the power of the sun, it's like something that is really unique and really interesting as part of their lore. All right. I also really like the fact that they're a dynasty with two different color schemes. Like the living gold thing is only reserved for the high ranking members of the dynasty and the forces under those high ranking members. And so everyone else has a gunmetal and blue color scheme, which is the original color scheme of the dynasty. I find that to be really cool. It can be a really interesting force to show on the tabletop, you know. It can lead to different stories of an army. Like, hey, you have like half the army is in that gunmetal and blue scheme, and then you see like another detachment have all gold Necrons, and then the overlord is gold because he's a higher ranking member of the dynasty. I think it's really cool, and it can lead to interesting visual armies. In regards to their Pharaon Szilfec, I could not help but think of Xerxes as portrayed in the movie 300 for some reason. It's the gold. I think it's the theme of gold and like how Xerxes is, where he's kind of like mad as in crazy, and so is Szilfec. And I don't know. I just now I imagine that Szilfec sounds like Xerxes. Like, I don't know. But when I read the lore for Szilfec, I thought immediately Xerxes from 300. Overall, I think they're a cool dynasty. The ability to transport across or teleport across the battlefield is something that's really cool. A little story. I don't play the Nephrek dynasty, but one day I was playing a game against the Thousand Suns, and I knew that the Thousand Suns had this weird magic warp thing going on with them. I didn't really know the rules, but I knew that they had something like that going on for them. And so what I did was I used the Nephrek rules for my game against the Thousand Suns. And I didn't know about their lore of, them combating against the Thousand Suns. I just chose the rules for the Nephrek dynasty because of that teleportation ability. And I gotta tell you, that game was super fun, especially against the Thousand Suns. Like, everyone, like my army and my opponent's army, were just teleporting across the field, and it was just hilarious to see. Like, we would teleport through things, and then the Thousand Suns would do some warp thing and end up really next to us. Like, it was cool. It was really cool. So if you face off against Thousand Suns primarily, I would recommend doing the Nephrek, or at least using the rules of teleportation, and you'll see how fun it is. It's just super cool to do, and it contributes to a great time on the tabletop. Well, without anything else to say, Inquisitor Vaughn out. Remember, the Emperor protects and the future is successor.